Oh, okay, there we go. Wow, the lights are very, very bright. There are four lights. If you're old, you get the reference from Star Trek The Next Generation when Picard is taken kidnapped by the Borg. Okay. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. I am so thrilled to be able to share with you the debut title from Roxane Gay Books, And Then He Sang a Lullaby. Thank you. And a remarkable writer. And before he reads from the novel, I would love to talk a little bit about it so we can give the audience some context. So, what is this novel about in your own words?
Um, I would say it's definitely about freedom. It's about love. It's about family, and it's about the ways in which the way the world treats us kind of shapes the way we see the world and the way we interact with the world. And I really hope people get that from reading it, get its impetus and imagination for our pursuit of freedom. So, thank you.
One of my favorite things about this novel is that it's a love story, and I am, at my core, a romantic. It's a love story between two young men from very different lives who find a way to come together against a backdrop of Nigeria, where it is illegal to be gay and out and in the world, and yet these two young men still try and fight for one another. And so, Coyote, I thought it would be lovely if you could read a bit from your novel before we talk more about it. Awesome.
So I'm going to just read from the first chapter because I think it opens, you know, is when I read it, it's going to really kind of contextualize what the book is about. So I'll just start. Chapter 1. August's mother refused to name him before his birth. There remained this gentleness still to the child growing in her womb, a hushed quality that kept her from pinning her hopes on it. She would not name the baby until it was swimming in her arms. Her daughters did not understand this, or at least Ozamaka and Chinyere did not. The youngest, Peculiar, was too young to understand or not understand. She simply walked in her sister's footsteps and repeated the questions they asked. It wasn't something their mother could explain to them. She did not want them to worry. She herself worried sometimes when her faith faltered. On those occasions, she read herself the letter she'd received from Kaduna, sitting in the darkness of her room. To her right, the curtains drawn, as though if she let light fall on the brown paper, it would crumble into dust in her shaking hands. Dearest sister, you will have a son, and it shall not kill you. I dreamt of your blessing. God is always faithful, and his word says, of whose report shall we believe? Have faith. Her sister's letters did not make her heart impervious to her doctor's warning. She still remembered the way he pointed at her. Mrs. Akasike, I hope you heard me. Don't try again. Don't at all, you would not survive it. Take care of the ones God has given you. But the letter made her feel as though she had God's very own grace behind her. And with that came a sort of courage. A courage that eluded her husband. I'm afraid, he told her once, his head resting on the roundness of her stomach. They were in the living room, she lying sideways on the couch so that her protruding belly was resting on the cushion. He sitting on the floor in nothing but shorts, rubbing her stomach gently. The children had already retired to their rooms, and an old episode of Checkmate was playing on the TV. She loved his belly rubs, and the way his whole face would light up if he felt the baby move. It's just pregnancy, she said, laughing. When he kissed her stomach, rubbed his cheek against the warmth of her belly, she said, God will make a name for himself. I trust in him. August grew up thinking his mother brave, though foolish. It was one of those things he never said out loud, a thought he allowed himself only in the privacy of his own mind. He knew how sad it would make his sisters, how they would repeat it to one another, whispering, making sure their whispers were loud enough for him to hear. Did you hear what August said? Did you hear? Their heads would be shaking morosely from side to side. Sometimes, when August said or did something his sisters thought unacceptable, they told him a story about his mother to make him sufficiently remorseful for what he had done, what she had sacrificed for him to live. August gathered all those stories, nursed them until they were ingrained in him, almost memories of his own. He knew the folds of his mother's skin, the round immunization scar on her right shoulder, the contours and ridges of the stretch marks that danced outwards from her navel in slender lines, even the way her voice broke when she cried. He knew his story too, every bit of it, every detail of every event. He could trace the defiance in his mother's face as she sat in the car almost 2 months before her due date, trying to breathe deeply and evenly. The more he ruminated on these memories, the more he was enveloped with pangs of incompleteness, and almost something he should feel that he never would, someone he knew enough to love but never met. She would have been alive were it not for you, he sometimes thought to himself. Thank you.
I know that every novel has an origin story and a reason that it came to being. And so, what is the origin story of Then He Sang a Lullaby?
So I started writing and then sang a lullaby on the 1st of August, 2018. So, now you know where the August came from. So I was working in Port Harcourt at the time. I was a medical laboratory assistant. I was an intern. And, it's a very, very boring job. It's a very mundane job. You basically just collect samples and you record people's information and then you run the test. It's very routine. So I always kept myself busy by imagining stories for all the patients, right? So, or maybe she's going through a divorce and, this person hasn't spoken to his brother for 15 years. Or so things like that. And I think it was on the 29th of July or the 30th of July, a baby was born in the hospital that had kind of, a very challenging birth where they had a lot of complications, health-wise. And it kind of got me thinking of, what could that baby's backstory be? And that kind of basically gave birth to August, because August was born with a lot of those symptoms as well, elevated bilirubin, jaundice, malnourishment, etc. And and then when I got the idea of August, I then wanted to keep going, right? Why stop at childhood? Just keep going and keep going. And I followed it to its logical conclusion, and I'm very glad I did. It paid off, so. Yeah.
One of my favorite aspects of the novel is that he has 3 sisters.
Yes.
And those 3 sisters are, sorry. Do you guys hear that? Yeah. Can whoever's phone is beeping, please mute it? So he has these 3 sisters, and the 3 sisters kind of function like a character in and of themselves. And so I would love to know more about your thinking around the sisters and the role that they play in August's life.
So with the sisters, it was a very, very experimental thing, because there are some times that I don't even differentiate which sister he's actually interacting with, because in the story, I feel like the sisters basically merged into one mother, because August kind of grew up without his mother, but just in a way where his sisters already just absorbed the role of his mother, all 3 of them. So that's really because I wanted to also contrast his upbringing with, that of Segun, which had a very more political kind of undertone, whereas his own mother basically was very sheltering and very kind of protective in a way.
Now, the other half of this novel really is about Shegun, who grew up very differently, was an only child, had very politically involved parents. He comes from an impoverished background, and yet he also has a really strong sense of self. How much of yourself did you put into Shegun, and how do you decide which parts of yourself you're going to put into your characters and which parts of yourself you're going to hold back?
So that's a very interesting question, because I don't even think I actually like consider it per se, right? People always ask me, oh, which one of the character is you? And it's like all of them. So there's basically me in all of them, but some more than the others, right? And with Shegun, it was basically I really, because the novel wasn't like planned and with a plot plan and a book plan and things like that, because it was very spontaneous and very wherever the story leads kind of writing, I didn't really plan how much of myself I was going to invest in Shegun. And so I just went all the way and really, really it was a character that I didn't have personal separation from, right? But what I wanted to kind of achieve was, to also show a different type of person, because, Shegun's character and the kind of very political, demeanor and outlook to the world is something that you don't always see so often represented in our media, right? And even normally, because in Nigeria, particularly with regards to queer rights, there is a very big fatalism where people don't think anything can change. So most people aren't out here being like, yeah, we're going to, this is unacceptable, we're going to stop this law. It's like, what can you do is one of those things. And I just wanted to create and explore a character that didn't think like that, because that's basically me. That basically said, I don't accept the premise at all. Like, the premise itself is even unacceptable to me. I'm not going to start my negotiation from the premise. I want the premise completely thrown away. And so that's, one of the kind of central ways in which I because that kind of hope is also very vulnerable, right? And that's because of that, I just invested quite a bit of myself in his character.
One of the things that you do notice throughout the novel is that despite the difficulties, it is ultimately an optimistic novel in its own way. And I suspect that's directly tied to your queer liberation politics. And so I would love for you to expand on what you mean when you say queer liberation.
So when I say queer liberation, I mean a freedom that is more holistic, because a lot of the times activism is very hindered by notions of equality, right? It's like, oh, my role as an activist is to attain equality of, queer people to cisgender people. And it's like, but cisgender people aren't even free themselves. Like, why would you want to be like them? I mean, in as much as we don't have, universal gender affirming healthcare, which we need, cisgender people don't have it either. They just don't they just need it less, but they don't have it either. And the same thing, happens with healthcare and, housing and all of that, education. Because the thing is, when I think of freedom, I like to think of the resources that we need to survive, not, the legal rights that is going to get me legally equal to someone else. I think of, what do I need to survive? Because that kind of thinking is way, way more expansive. It's not limited by anything. You can just decide, you can just ask yourself actually what you need, right? If you need housing, you need housing. It's not but do they have housing? It's like, I need housing. So if they don't have it, I mean, I don't care, I still need housing. So that's that kind of, because of that, I'm very, very, because again, it's like when you look at oppression as a very, very holistic structure, it becomes very obvious that liberation must also take that form, because you can't say that you're fighting for the liberation of queer people and then your analysis stops at just decriminalization, right? Because when when queer people aren't criminalized and they're not in jail, they would need somewhere to live, and then they would need an education, and then they would need jobs, and then they would need healthcare. So we need, I mean, when they don't have it, it's basically still the same sort of oppression in itself. So because of that, I think that that distinction of queer liberation activism from, your more of liberal, average, like LGBT rights activist that's why it's very important for me to be like, I'm not a gay rights activist, I'm not an LGBT rights activist, I'm a queer liberation activist because my politics seeks the total liberation of queer people, not just, an engagement with what is legal for other people and what is not legal for us. So I hope that answers the question. I feel like I rambled quite a bit.
No, that answered the question, and
Okay.
I love how optimistic and expansive it is, and that you look at all of these intersections of what we need to not only survive but thrive. One of the challenges when you have political ambitions in your fiction is making sure that you're balancing storytelling and the beauty of language with those political ambitions. So how do you balance telling a political story but also writing a beautiful story? Because this novel is beautifully written.
Thank you. Um, so it's a hard question to answer because it's something that you do mostly, subconsciously, right? Because, the thing about the book is, in as much as it's quite political, because I'm someone who doesn't think that fiction should, I don't approach fiction from a very laid back or commercial or, rules type of way, right? I don't believe in this book shouldn't really preach this much, or this shouldn't do this. I'm a very, very much go all the way. This is what I want to do with the book. This is what I want to do with the book. But the special thing about it is it's also a love story. So all the political manifestations that are going on in the book is going on within the context of a body romance, which I feel like just automatically helps really diffuse the message itself. Because at the same time, it's like people think, the political is very boring or very like jarring or stuff like that. But I think that the political is actually like things that are very beautiful. Like love is very political, right? And I feel like even the politics espoused in the book is also tied to like the endless pursuit of a world where they can be free and where they can love each other the way they want. So I feel like because of that, the politics is basically contextualized with the personal, like, kind of romantic ideals that necessitate them. So,
Every novel has some sort of interesting story about how it came to be. And one of the things that struck me most about your novel, which I didn't know at the time when I first read it, was that you wrote it by hand and then typed it into your phone. And as someone with terrible handwriting and not that much patience, how did that process affect the way that the story evolved? And really, how do you keep track of such a significant body of work in such an organic way?
So it wasn't a choice. So I'm from a very like poor family, so I didn't have a laptop at the time. I think my first laptop I got it like from my job at like in 2021, I think. So I didn't have a laptop in 2018, and so when I came up with the story of August, and I decided like I definitely need to write this book. I bought an 80-leaf notebook, so it's like 80 leaves of exercise paper basically, and I started writing. So the thing is, the writing, because my internship was also unpaid, so I didn't even have access to data as well. So I would have these things where there are some details I need to confirm before I write them down. But because I don't have internet, I'll just scribble in something and know that when I come back, I'll get from the context what I was trying to say, what I was trying to say here. So, and then after writing the whole book, because the book in the beginning was just about August. It was from just August's perspective completely. But then when August met Segun and their story kind of evolved in a way that is intricately tied to that of one another, I just realized I definitely have to write the, origin of Shegun as well. So I went back and then I wrote earlier chapters, of Shegun's story. But the first draft was about just August, and I finished it in, within a year, right? Which is when the actual work started, which was typing it. I feel like typing, the most tedious part of the process was definitely typing it into my phone, because there's this thing like when you are typing words into Word documents, when when the word starts getting like above 10,000 and starts going up, the document starts to hang. Like if you try to scroll through it, it's definitely, and it's not going to move until you close the app and open the app. And sometimes if it didn't even autosave before that, you have to start doing the whole thing again. So I created I created a different file for every single chapter of the story, and then typed it individually and edited individually in the files before compiling it back together. So it was a very, very, and because of that, it gave me a bit of separation, like from the book while like editing it, right? Because, okay, maybe when I go back, I realize that, when I change this word, because I've already written like the later chapters, I realized, okay, maybe this would work more to kind of also develop what is going to happen further down the story. So it really gave me a more laid-back editorial view of the book, right? So I feel like that helped in its own way. Well, it was, it was quite tedious.
And yet you stuck with it.
Yeah, I stuck with it.
And now here we are. What are some of your favorite love stories that might have influenced the way that you wrote Shegun and August's love story?
So this isn't like a fiction book, but I do believe it's like a very, very serious love story. Pedagogy of the Oppressed by Paulo Freire. I feel like that book really kind of, particularly if you're like from a country like Nigeria, where it isn't so much a quote-unquote culture war, because one side just completely controls all power, so it's not even really a war. There's just one side that does whatever they want. And I feel like Pedagogy of the Oppressed kind of really provides an analysis that can help you see hope even through that, because it kind of explains why even people that are oppressed participate in the oppression of other people, and also kind of provides you with kind of a way of seeing that even that can be overcome, right? As opposed to being like, oh, every other, like, I'm poor, but all the other poor people also hate me, so like, who even am I going to fight with, right? There's a very big fatalism that comes from that kind of reality. And I feel like Paulo Freire's book really sets out an analysis that kind of convinces you that of the capacity of justice that everybody has, even if they've not gotten to that particular level of development as a decent human being. So because it's very, very like important for you to, because it's also a very big, it's like Thomas Sankara said, like, you need a little bit of madness in a way to look at, let's say, 90% of the population supporting laws that criminalize you and decide, I'm going to dedicate my time and energy and everything to trying to basically overturn this number, right? It's a very, very, unrealistic task to basically take up. And I feel like it's very necessary for that kind of expansion of love that Paulo Freire gives, for you to decide, you know what, is worth my while, regardless of whatever the outcome is definitely worth it. So
I just appreciate the optimism of that, which is very refreshing, because most people would be like 90%, okay, not much I can do here. Igbo storytelling, the oral traditions have really influenced how you approach storytelling. Yep. And so I would love for you to talk a bit about those storytelling traditions and how they've helped you become a storyteller yourself.
So my culture, because I'm Igbo, is a very, very, is very steeped in an oral tradition, right? Like our histories are passed down through retellings and retellings and retellings, which, the colonizers thought was primitive, but it is also very liberating in a way that more, written cultures or written histories aren't. Because when society changes, the story changes with them. So there's never any rule that is permanent that just sticks down, even after 2,000 years, when the world is just completely different. And because of that, even Igbo language is just very, very poetic type and very expressive type of language that would take the longer, more scenic routes every single time. So it's very, very, and I feel like as a writer that also writes in Igbo, it influences my voice, it influences my style. There are editors that have sent stories to that thought this is just too flowery. And I'm like, I'm an Igbo man. Like, so, I feel like it really did help because a lot of time, I've gotten so much feedback on this story and about how the language is just beautiful. And it's like, yeah, that's Igbo. I mean, it's not Igbo, but it's definitely thanks to Igbo. So, yeah, I feel like it has really, really kind of influenced the type of writer I am.
How did you think about audience and cultural translation when you got into the editing process and were preparing the novel to be read by a Western audience and an African audience?
Yes. So after writing the book, I first tried to get an agent and get, a Nigerian publisher, because my logic was first-time author, no, I didn't have a worldwide profile, so I would just start local. But because it's a queer book, it didn't. In fact, I got only one response. Other people didn't even bother to respond at all. And then I saw Roxane's imprint that was accepting submissions, and you didn't need to have an agent to send the submission. So I was like, well, I already have the novel. I already wrote it, so I sent it in. And yeah, I got the call back, and that was very, very exciting for me. But it also came with its own anxieties, right? Because I'm someone that really cares about, access for my work, right? And access to the people I specifically wrote it for. I know when a major American publisher is swooping in to get your book, it's a very, very much mixed bag. I don't know what to expect. But, I'm very, very glad because I was worried that I would have to, water down or change key things about the book to kind of make it more palatable to a Western audience. And that was a big fear of mine. But I was ready to fight, actually. I was I was prepared to say put my foot down and because in the end, as much as I'm very glad that my book has found such a wonderful readership in the West, it's a book I wrote for Nigerian queer people, right? I love that people in the US and the UK and all over the world are reading it and really loving it, but I wrote it specifically for Nigerian queer people. So I wanted it to be a Nigerian book that wrote bearing in mind that it was being written for a Nigerian audience. So that was a very important thing for me. And lucky for me, it was Roxane. So she didn't push back. She didn't she was like, if you think this is it, this is it. And it was also in a way that I also got constructive feedback because there were also some, because I have my whole life I've lived in Nigeria, right? There are some things that you wouldn't even know you also need to contextualize for people that aren't Nigerians, and it was very helpful to have someone from outside to kind of point this out. It wasn't a situation where I would have to change something, but kind of knowing that it needs to be contextualized, kind of putting context around it to make it more easily discernible to Western audiences. So it worked out really great.
It did. And, I'm a firm believer in making audiences do some work. We don't have to always translate our languages and our cultures. If you care enough, you will get your Google fired up and figure it out, or come to a beautiful library like this one. And they didn't ask me to say that. It's just, look at this room. It's outrageous. What are you working on next? No pressure.
So I'm working on something that is a bit historical. So something that stretches back into, well, not that far into our history, but 80s, 90s,
Yes, the 80s and 90s, ancient history. Every time he says that, I'm just like, do you know how old I am? But go on, tell us about the 90s.
My apologies. So, but it's a story that basically kind of looks at how we got here, right? In terms of how we had things in the 80s, for instance, right? Because from someone that actually experienced the passing of the SSMPA, it kind of gave me the understanding that even just one thing can really change the course of a country's history, can change an environment, can change the political kind of space. Because, like before the SSMPA, homosexuality wasn't legal in Nigeria, right? But there wasn't as much like vigilance over it. And then the law was passed and just everything went underground, right? And I wanted to just, instead of stopping in kind of analyzing the way love kind of existed between those, kind of before and after, to even go back, right? How did the structural adjustment program, for instance, affect queer people? Like knowing that programs like that increase religious fundamentalism, right? How were queer people involved in resisting that? Like, what did their love look like in 1980? What songs were they listening to? What were they dancing to in the clubs? And where were they going to have hangouts in the afternoons and things like that? So I really wanted to. That's what I'm working on. It's kind of, it sounds fun, but it requires quite a bit of like research. I'm always, reading archival newspapers and stuff like that. But I'm very excited about it, and I'm excited to see where it leads me. So
I have one last question before I open it up to the audience, and it's a question I love to ask all creative people. What do you like most about your work and how you do it?
yes, so what I would say I like most about my work is how it's not restricted, right? Because like when you come from Nigeria, there is quite a lot going on. Like the way we say it is like Nigeria will happen to you. That's how we say it in Nigeria. So like someone could, maybe you wanted to travel from somewhere to like visit your family member in like, I don't know, Kaduna or something, and you get kidnapped, which is something that could actually really happen. So like people will say something like, Nigeria happened to them, or something like that. And when I write that kind of, crushing reality doesn't have to like restrict what I do. I can imagine boundlessly, like the kind of world I want to imagine, the type of social relations that exist in that world. And I really think it's because again, like I view myself first as a queer liberation activist and a revolutionary. And I think that one of the biggest obstacles to liberation is that people find it so hard to imagine it. People just find it, like you tell people, you tell them that, oh, this world we currently live in is so bad. And you're like, okay, but so what do you want? What would you like, right? You tell someone that prisons are fucking violent and they're like, okay, so what's the alternative? And it's like, we could actually give people food so they don't actually steal food and then go to prison for stealing. Like, I don't know if you get what people can't imagine worlds like that. They can't, or they find it very hard to imagine a world where, people have healthcare for free, or people don't have to fall into debt to afford their education, or people don't have to give their children out to go work somewhere because they can't actually like afford to raise their own kids. So, and I feel like when writing, I have the freedom to imagine a world that is like that, or at least imagine a conscious pursuit of such a world that shows people that actually we don't have to concede to their premise at all, right? And that's something that fiction really does for me. It gives me the opportunity to fly as far as I want to fly. And that's why I really, really like, that's the best thing I love about it. Thank you.
I love that answer, the idea of being unbound, and I can't wait to see where your imagination flies you next. In the meantime, though, we would love to take questions from the audience, and there we go. The microphone is ready, so just raise your hand when you're ready. There we go in the back.
Testing. David, we have one here. And then, yes, girl.
Among the things we learned tonight is that you have a great smile and a great sense of humor. What writers of humor are you a fan of?
I don't really, now that I think about it, most of the humor I consume is mostly performance humor, because there's quite a thing in Nigeria where like it's called like Night of 1,000 Laughs, where like it's basically like stand-up, where multiple comics come and try to make acts, and of course a lot of them are horrible. So well, there quite a bit of them are really good, right? And I also like it. I know that this is probably not the answer that you might have been looking for, but I also think that there's quite a lot of humor in TikTok. I feel like TikTok creators sometimes you feel like, did you just make this video like as a TikTok video? Are you actually a comedian that wrote a comic skit? Because it's very, very creative, and it's wild how like in a few years we didn't even have something like this, and now this platform comes along and completely changes how we also consume things like comedy. So TikTok as well. I'm sorry if that doesn't answer your question.
But TikTok is really funny.
Yeah.
And I'm ashamed to say my parents introduced me to TikTok because Haitian TikTok is amazing. And if you haven't seen Haitian TikTok, get with it, because it is just, my people, it is so goddamn funny, every single one. And there's a lot of amazing thinking and humor happening on TikTok amongst like the rest of the stuff. And I really enjoy it. I know there was a question over here.
Hi, I've known you for like a while, and I've loved your writing forever. But I wanted to ask you a question, because this is a queer story, and you say you want to write this for queer Nigerians, and now they're like underground. How do you plan to like push this book? And I really want everyone to read it, not just queer Nigerians. How do you think they would receive this book? One, because this is the first story that I've seen or heard of like from a Nigerian that's about queer people, and like, how's that going to work? Because I really want this to do well, and I do want people to talk about this. I'm so proud of you.
Thank you.
And the book is being published in Nigeria by Cassava Republic,
Yes.
for
Yes.
all of you to know.
So first of all, I just wanted to start with saying that there are quite a number of queer writers that are publishing quite a lot of wonderful books in Nigeria. I know that the earliest novel I read that had a queer protagonist in a way that actually seriously treated the book was Walking with Shadow by Jude Dibia, which I think was published in like the 2000s. So it's like they've also been quite a bit of queer books. There's currently Akweke, there's a lot of poetry, there's Romeo, there's Logan February. So it's very, very, it's a scene that's also opening up quite a bit, because queer Nigerians are just so talented. I'm not saying it because I'm one of them, I promise. So, but how I intend to basically push the book, it was very important to me to have a Nigerian publisher. It was also one of the things that I immediately had to talk to Roxanne about, because initially she offered to get worldwide rights. And I wanted the rights to Nigeria to stay with a Nigerian publisher, particularly because I believe that it would make the book way, way more like cheaper for a Nigerian. I mean, this is $27. Like if you convert that to Naira, that's that's tens of thousands of Naira. Nobody's paying that for a novel. So I mean, there are people that pay it, but not many Nigerians can afford to pay that for a novel. So, and that was very important for me. And thankfully, the book will be out next month. There's a lot of events that we're already looking at doing to also get the word out. There's going to be a launch. We're going to try to also do like maybe panels or discussions of the book to kind of make sure that people are talking about it and also kind of discussing the themes of the book, which is I feel like is the entire point. Yes, so yeah. I hope so. I have doubts. I mean, it's Nigeria, but yeah.
Good evening. Thank you for both being here. My name is Prince Charity, and I'm curious about what role spirit plays in your book, and if you're comfortable, what role spirit plays in your personal life.
Oh, okay. Yes. Thank you. So full disclosure, I'm an atheist. So let's start there. But in the book, August is a very, very religious person, right? Not religious in like the evangelicals, like he's not going to go on a bus to evangelize or whatever, but he's someone that really, really like does believe in God, right? Which is kind of a double-edged sword, because in as much as it brings a lot of comfort, it also brings a lot of disappointment when you really believe that God is there and you are praying for something and that thing doesn't happen. It's like, I really trusted in you, and like, where's the answer to my prayer? So there is that as well, and there is a lot of conflict in kind of navigating that, particularly because he also has a very like high, almost spiritual relationship with the memory of his dead mother. So it's almost like it's almost like God and his mother merges sometimes, like in the book as well. And then Segun is a much more, because Segun comes from a very political family, and there's when like you come from a family that's just very, very political, like the spiritual is downplayed more and more, even though like his parents still do believe in a God, but it's a situation where there is a very big difference in the way the both characters approach the role that spirituality plays in how they approach their queerness, whereas August kind of sees his spirituality in contention with his queerness. Segun just does like it's not that he believes that God likes queer people per se. It's just that he just does not think of the two as in contention with each other at all. They're just two separate things that exist on their own. So that's kind of, and I no longer believe in the spiritual, but I really find it very fascinating. I think I think spiritual belief is just something that is it's just something very human about it, very like to just completely believe in something bigger than us, that cares very deeply about us, or that kind of guides our life in some way. So it's something I write quite a bit about, because it's it's a very fascinating and beautiful, subject matter to me. Thank you.
Hi.
Hello.
I wanted to say thank you for hosting this first. And my question to you was, who's the writer who you find you go to for comfort or inspiration the most? And also, like, do you see yourself in the writing?
I don't think there's any particular writer per se. I know that the work of Cloud Ake really does something very like intimate for me. It's kind of like you live in a world that doesn't make sense, but when you open this book, you understand wide world. Does it make sense? Which kind of makes the world make sense in its own way. So, like, because of that, I really love Cloud Ake. And I feel like it's because he writes specifically about Nigeria and Africa as a whole, which is something that, like, you know, is very, very... But that's, by the way, Cloud Ake is an academic writer. He's a political economist. But in terms of novels, right, I have just a wide range of novelists that I just love their work. And because I love their work, it's mostly it's very comforting to read them. There is Sally Rooney, there is Khalid Hosseini, there is Akweke, there is, I read quite a bit of poetry as well. I love Romeo's work. I love Logan February. So, you know, works like that, Chukuniwe, it's works that really, they're just a very beautiful poetry to it and a very beautiful kind of expressiveness to the language that just makes you feel like you're sailing on water. So, yeah.
Hi, thanks. By the way, I just want to say, apropos of nothing, that someone near me smells really, really good. And I'm dying to know what the scent is. But that's not what I wanted to ask you. So when, because I write nonfiction, and I've always been curious about this with fiction writers. When you start your novel, do you know how it's going to end and where the story's going? Or are you sometimes surprised at how a character develops? And at some point, do they take over and they're in control?
Yes, yeah. And people always like complain to me sometimes when they don't like the ending of, let's say, a short story I write or something. And because you are the author, so you definitely have control of that. Like, at least that's how they see it. But there's sometimes that, particularly with me, like when I write, this story sometimes does want to go where it wants to go. And even with, and then he sang a lullaby because like their love story was just very, very fascinating for me. I'm someone that I'm a very big romantic. I love love. Like, I root for love so much. And I was rooting for their love to actually end up happily ever after. But it's like, it was such a one-way ticket, like, kind of ending, right? The ending ended up being way more nuanced than that. And I didn't want the story to end that way. In fact, I wrote like 3 separate endings for this book, but it was like, there is only one that did not feel forced, right? Which is what I ended up going with. So sometimes, particularly because I'm a writer that doesn't plan, like, I don't do plot plans or book plans. I mean, if I did it, probably help me more, but I'm just a very, very big go with the vibes, follow the story type of writer, and the story will lead you to so many unexpected places. And at least that's how I experience it most of the time. Thank you.
Vibes. I, too, am not an outliner, though, so I get it.
All right, y'all, we are going to find our natural break in the conversation and continue it out there in the signing line. So please, please, please make sure, if you haven't snagged a copy of the book from us, request it from the library, but also snag it from us because we're great. But definitely request it from the library. And of course, we will do our signing right out there just after. But for now, please give a giant round of applause to Kayode and Roxanne.
Thank you.